I'm not a famous person or a high-profile figure for someone to stalk me. In fact, I'm not even an active person on social media, even though I have an account, but I hardly use it. What happened over the past month scared me to the point that just remembering it sends shivers down my spine. If you've been through similar experiences, know that you're not alone. It actually started last August. I was reading a novel while lying on my bed to pass the time. It was 10:30 that night, and the darkness didn't seem to be able to calm my tired body. Drinking coffee before bed wasn't a good idea, but the night atmosphere needed a cup of hot coffee to complete it. After what seemed like a long hour, it was already time, and the evening breeze was starting to pick up a little, which made the sounds of the trees and branches shaking as if it was a sign to me that it was time for bed. I stood up and headed towards the small staircase by the window, when a figure outside caught my eye. At first, I thought it was an animal, but when I got closer to the window, it was definitely a person standing next to a tree. Not too close, but not too far away either. I felt a sudden shiver run through my body. The thought of someone standing outside your house looking at you at night is truly terrifying. The person wasn't moving, but I was sure he was staring at me. But I couldn't identify him because the shade of the tree was making it difficult to see. So that night, I immediately covered all the windows and went straight to bed. The thought of checking who that person was in the middle of the night was really scary. Maybe it was just a neighbor joking or something. The next day, everything was normal. But what happened that night still bothered me. But it didn't reach the point of obsession or worry about it. When night fell again, I didn't do my usual night routine because a friend called me. We talked about the quality of life we live since we graduated from college, as we hadn't been in touch for years, and after an hour of endless stories we said goodbye, and I ended the call. It was 11:47 when I went to my room, and while I was making my bed, I felt the window tempting me to look out of it. I was curious to see if the person was there, and the fear inside me resurfaced. But I wanted to be reassured. I scanned the window and saw no one standing, so I felt a sudden sense of relief wash over me. Maybe it was just a joke the whole time. I finally moved away from the window to go to sleep. But I froze in shock and my heart started beating wildly when my eyes caught something. I looked again, but slowly, and the person was there, but closer than before. Closer enough that I could tell it was a man. At first, I couldn't see him because my eyes were focused on the tree, but I didn't know he was getting closer. He was standing next to my rose garden, staring at me expressionlessly. I immediately turned on the lights and ran to the living room in terror. I only know I didn't sleep that night. On the third day, the effects of staying awake started to show on my face, and my movement was a bit heavy. But I managed to go to work. The night fell again, and the same nightmare started, but more intense than the previous nights. The man came closer every night. This time he was standing right outside my window, only 10 steps away from the rose garden. The man was looking up at me. He didn't move. He just stood there motionless, watching me and examining me with his eyes. That was the last straw for me. And with trembling fingers, I immediately called the police. And I was sure that the matter would be over once they arrived. After a long hour of waiting, the police arrived, but the man had completely disappeared. The police searched the area, but did not find the man, however. They did find only one pair of footprints where the strange man had been standing. What was puzzling was that there were no other footprints leading to that spot. The ground around the footprints was untouched. It seemed as if the man had mysteriously appeared there and then disappeared in the same manner. The thought of it terrified me so much. The police told me to watch for any signs of the man and report him immediately. On the fourth day, I booked a hotel room because I couldn't stay in that house after what happened. Daytime was when I felt safest, so I would go home in the morning to get ready for work. The footprints that were found earlier were still there, and I couldn't stare at them for long. When night fell, I decided to stay home because I had to report the police if the man showed up again to end this nightmare. I had to endure my fear. I walked towards my room with my eyes fixed on the road, avoiding looking to any side. I opened the door of the room slowly, with my eyes still directed towards the bed. When I entered, intense fear began to creep inside me. I suddenly turned towards the window and was paralyzed in shock. The man was standing directly in front of the window. Only the glass separated us. I couldn't comprehend how the man was literally standing in front of my window when there was no ceiling or platform for him to stand on. He seemed to be floating. I didn't waste a second. I immediately ran out of my room, trembling, and ran towards the back door to escape this nightmare. I reached the road and swore I would never return to that place, and to this day, that scene still haunts me. My college friend and her roommates don't realize how lucky they are to never have to lock their door. When I visit them, they seem to get a culture shock when they try to break into my room only to find the door locked and no one has a key. I once accidentally locked the door, which resulted in one of my roommates being out all night and having to walk to a friend's house to sleep there. No one got mad at me though. They understood why I was sticking to this habit. My friend and I were remote colleagues, and since I work from home, she and her colleagues were out most of the day. I would come and stay for a week at a time. They all worked Saturdays, but I had the weekend off. I would lie in my friend's bed in the room closest to the front door, and I would close the door and slip under the covers to relax until I felt like getting up and starting my day. The apartment complex they lived in consisted of connected buildings, but they had separate stairs and entrances for each section of apartments. My friend's apartment was in the upper left corner of the last building closest to the forest. The place was in an upscale neighborhood, on the outskirts of two busy areas. The front doors of the buildings were never locked, the neighbors never even bothering to suggest that they locked them. They would leave them partially open using large rocks most of the day and night, and sometimes, when they weren't open this way, the door would slam shut before bouncing back to stay slightly open. My friend always advised me to never open the door, especially if I was alone. That morning, about an hour after the girls left, I was reading a post on my cell phone when I heard the door slam shut with what sounded like a scream for help. I sat up straight on the bed trying to hear. Well, maybe I was wrong. I was prone to anxiety and had a diagnosis of OCD, and knew my thoughts could take dark turns and lead to worst-case scenarios that were often far from reality. I listened but didn't hear any other sounds. It seemed like there were 2 floors between the hallway and my friend's front door. As the sounds of stumbling footsteps, labored breathing, and palms on the wall drew closer, I heard another cry for help. I was absolutely sure this time of what I had heard, and a sudden surge of fear swept over me at the sound. There was something unnatural and frightening about the tone of the scream. I quietly slipped out of bed and approached my friend's bedroom door. I heard the woman struggling to the top of the stairs and screaming for help again. But instead of heading straight for my friend's apartment door, which was directly to her left, I heard the woman knocking loudly on the door of the person opposite in the hallway. I felt relieved and guilty at the same time. There were 2 doors separating my friend's apartment and the person across the street's apartment. After the woman tried knocking on the 2 doors in the middle, she finally reached the front door of my friend's apartment. I gasped and jumped up, covering my mouth with my hands and pushing open my friend's door, which thankfully didn't make any noise, and looked out into the hallway. I was balancing between risking looking through the peephole and fearing that she might notice a shadow and realize I was inside, so I would ignore her. I was also afraid of what I might see on the other side of the door. To my shock and horror, the doorknob started shaking, and this time, the knocking was louder and longer than what I had done with the other neighbors' doors. Gathering all my courage, I took cautious steps towards the entrance. I tried my best to avoid making any sounds, even though I doubted she could hear me over her violent knocking. Once I was close enough to be able to look through the peephole without my shadow appearing beneath it, I bent down and peered through the small hole. My throat went dry, and I had to stifle a scream that turned into a stifled cough. Standing suspiciously in front of the keyhole was a grown man with a disheveled beard, chapped lips, a running nose, and a crazy look in his eyes. I cursed myself for leaving the phone on the bed, and suddenly the noise stopped. I felt like I was frozen in place, waiting to hear him give up and walk away, but he didn't. I wanted to run to get my phone to call 911, but I was scared that he might try to break down the door if he heard me, and since I had nothing else to do, my deadly curiosity made me look again through the peephole. He was just standing there, breathing loudly and sharply with the big, hysterical smile on his face. His lips started bleeding from the cracked wound. He barely had any teeth, and the ones that were left were either completely black or a dark brown and green mixture. He took a big breath through his nose, and his eyes rolled back in his head. Then he screamed in a voice that sounded exactly like a woman's. "Why won't you help me?" It took every ounce of self-control and patience. I had to walk back to my friend's room, cautiously so as not to be discovered. As soon as I entered the room, I rushed out and started searching through the covers for my phone. As soon as I grabbed it, I quickly called 911, but at the last moment, a different idea came to my mind. With trembling fingers, I searched YouTube for videos of an angry man threatening someone. I started scrolling through the options until a suitable clip appeared. I went back to the front door again and set the phone to full volume and played the clip. The voice from the phone started, "Who is knocking on my door like that at this time? Are you crazy? You know what? Let me get my gun so we can say good morning together." Then the sound of a gun was heard at the end of the clip. This sound was enough to send the man running down the stairs. Then I heard the door slam shut as he left the building. I checked the peephole to make sure he really left and thought about calling the police, but realized I would have nothing but my story to tell and no one would believe it. I came back trembling and decided to head to the kitchen and dining room to get a bottle of water and sit for a while. On my way, I passed by the small balcony that I rarely look out of, and suddenly, I felt scared again and ran very fast and moved the curtains aside. But I found nothing. I finally sighed in relief when I also remembered that the apartment was not on the ground floor. And yet, I raised my hand and put the curtains back and closed the balcony lock tightly. I am an engineering student who studies away from home. Sometimes because we only have classes from Monday to Friday, I try to go home on Friday nights and come back on Sunday nights to attend classes. I am a night owl and often stay up until 2 a.m. My parents don't accept this habit. I usually turn off the lights, lie in bed, and check my phone before sleeping. One day, suddenly heard movement outside the house. I ignored it and thought it was a dog. Then I went to sleep. Our house is located in a very open area, and the neighbors are relatively far away from us. In front of our house, there is an open space that sometimes people gather in the morning, but at night, it is completely deserted. I often tell my colleagues that if I were a thief, I would have chosen our house in this area to rob without hesitation. The next night, the more I thought about it, the more scared I became. From that day on, I started double-checking that the front door was locked. During this period, I started listening to horror stories on the internet and falling asleep while listening to them. After a few days, I forgot about the incident, but one night, I felt movement outside again, ignored it again. But this started happening at night, and I was too scared to check or tell my dad because he would scold me for staying up late. Last week when I was home for my usual weekend, I heard movement outside the house as usual. I tried to ignore it as I always do, but this time it was even scarier. I was watching a movie at the time, and suddenly I heard the door handle moving. I panicked and stopped the movie to listen well, but there was nothing. I tried again to ignore it, thinking it was just my imagination, but it happened again, this time with more force. I started to feel scared. But luckily I had made sure the locks were locked well several times before that. I usually completely forget these events when they happen during the day, and I never tell anyone about them. I don't know if it's because of those horror stories I hear, or if there is really someone outside. If there is really someone, then I'm only home during the weekends, so what will happen on the other days when I am away? Will everything be okay? I don't know what I should really do, or am I starting to lose my mind? I don't know. Thank you for following today's stories. Don't forget to support us by liking and subscribing to the channel and activating the notification bell to receive all our new stories full of mystery and horror. I wish you a scary night. See you.